All right, chapter 2-3. So today we are subtracting integers, and we're going to use a lot of the concepts that we talked about yesterday in adding integers because it's very similar. Okay. All right. So I want to talk about first, we talked about yesterday, those steps in solving or not the steps, but the rules of solving integers. And they're the same for subtracting integers. So as long as you have them in your notes from yesterday, we're good. Okay. If the signs are different, or if the signs are the same, whether they're both positive or both negative, then you add the two numbers and you take that sign. So if it's two negatives, remember two negatives goes deeper negative. So your answer is always going to be a negative when you have two negatives. When you have two positives, positive, positive goes higher positive. When you have opposite signs, when one is a plus and one is a minus, and it doesn't matter which one, but when one is a plus and one is a minus, you have to subtract the two numbers. And when you go to subtract the two numbers, that's where you recognize at the beginning the signs are different. Then you kind of take the signs out of the picture for a minute and you just subtract the two numbers, the biggest minus the littlest. Okay. And then once you have that answer, then you have to go back and determine, is my answer going to be a negative or positive? That's when you kind of click your sign brain back on and you look at the two numbers that you have. Of the two, which one is the higher number, and you always take that sign. And the reason you always take that sign, and again, I always go back to this because it's just such a visual analogy. If you are 10 feet deep in a hole and you only come up 5 feet, right? 10 minus 5, or let's say 4 feet. If you're in a 10-foot hole and you come up 4 feet, you're still 6 feet in that hole, right? So if you're 10 feet deep and you only rise 4 feet, that's adding 4 feet. Are you still underground? Are you still in a hole? So 10, right? 10 is the bigger number between 10 and 4. If you're 10 feet deep and you only come up 4 feet, you're still 6 feet underground. So that's why you have to kind of take the signs out of it for a second, and then at the end, rethink about the signs. Okay. All right. So when we're subtracting integers, there's a little bit different step, and then it'll look a lot like yesterday. So we know, we've talked about this before, that when we see parentheses like this, and there's a negative outside of those parentheses, really it's not there, but it's there. Okay. Whoops. It's really a -1. We never see the 1, but really every parenthesis, even yesterday when it was pluses, really there was a 1 out there. It just didn't do anything. It's kind of like a 1 in front of a variable. If it's a +1 in front of a variable, do we ever write it? We're not, it's just not there. There's a lot of things in math that it's there, but it's not there. So we always, when we see parentheses, right, we want to distribute. So we have to multiply what's inside the parentheses by a -1. Okay. Now, the easiest way to do this on your homework is to just simply, what's a negative times a negative? Positive. So make this a plus and this a plus. It's that simple. Okay. If you see negative, negative, make them both a plus. Now it should look like yesterday. If I do it in black, I think it'll look even better. There we go. Now it should look like yesterday's problem. Now we have -26 plus a +30. I have -26 and +30. Do my signs match? Okay, so my signs don't match. So now I'm going to forget my signs for a second, and I'm going to take 30 minus 26, and my answer is going to be 4. And now I have to determine what sign am I going to give that for? Well, between 26 and 30, if you just look at the absolute value of those two numbers, 30 is the bigger number. So that means I take the sign of 30, which in this case, 30 is the higher number. 30 is a positive. So my answer is +4, and you do not have to put the positive if you don't want. So when you're subtracting, there's that extra step. Okay. If you have two negatives, negative, negative makes a positive. Now this one, I will show you two different ways to do it. Okay. I think there is an easier way, and then I think there's a little bit more confusing way, but everybody's brain works a little different, and I don't care which way you do it. Okay. If you can recognize that 25 is positive and that negative sign makes the 32 negative, if you have 25 minus 32, okay, do the signs match? You have a +25 and a -32. You can take the 25 from the 32 which would be what, 7? And then between 25 and 32, if you're thinking of just the absolute value of those two numbers, 32 is a bigger number. 32 is negative, so your answer would be negative. I think that's the easier way to do it, but I will show you the other way to do it. And it's to make it look like the problems yesterday. I personally don't like this way, but like I said, I want to show you because I think everybody's brain works a little different. Okay, so this is an alternative way. If the other way makes sense to you and you don't even want to put this in your notes to confuse yourself, that's fine. All right. You can still, just like we here, we changed it and changed it. Okay, we can do the same thing here. We can change it and change it. And now it looks like yesterday's work. You're still going to get the exact same answer. Okay, you're still going to have a positive 25 and a negative 32. It's just, I think it kind of clutters the field a little bit, but you still would do this. You still would do 7. 32 is still a bigger number. So you take the sign of 32, which is negative, and so your answer is still negative 7. If you don't need to change it, and you're good with looking at it just like this, and it's a positive 25 and a negative 32, I think that's the cleaner way to do it. It takes out a step you don't have to worry about. So I will always do it this way from here on out in my notes, but if changing it make more sense to you, you are more than welcome to run with it, okay? All right, so let's look at number 6 as an example. You got negative 20 minus 13. Well, that means a negative 20 and a negative 13. If I have two negatives, what do I do to those two numbers? Trevor, we get mask up, Gage, mask up, please. What do you have to do to the two numbers if they're both negative? If the signs match, you what? Yes, add it. So 20 plus 13. Okay, you can do it out to the side or you can do it underneath, whatever works for you. 20 plus 13 is 33. So I know my answer is going to be 33. And now since the signs matched, I just keep the sign, right? Negative, negative goes what? Deeper negative. So a negative 20 and a negative 13 goes deeper negative. Okay, here's an example like our first one. Rather than trying to think about what a negative negative means, right? We already know negative negative goes what? Somebody tell me. That hasn't answered yet today. Negative negative goes, Logan? Positive. Negative negative goes positive. Just change it, change it. Makes it super simple. Okay? Change it, change it. Negative negative goes positive. Now it's a very simple 10 plus 23. 33, everything's positive, so your answer is going to be positive. If you can remember the negative negative rule, this whole lesson will be super simple for you. Okay, negative negative goes positive. Okay, let's do this example. 9 minus 13. Is the 9 positive or negative? Jackson, what do you think? 9's positive, so the 30 is negative, right? So our signs don't match. So what am I going to do with these two numbers? Subtract them. So 30 minus 9 is 21. So my answer is going to be 21. Now I have to decide on the sign for 21. Wait a minute, Bella? Negative, yeah. Because if you look at the absolute value of 30 and 9, 30 is a bigger absolute value. 30 is the one that has the negative attached to it. And so your answer takes the negative. Pretty simple. Let me look at these, make sure. Okay, here's one. Let's do this one. I want to make sure I do an example of everything that you might see. So I've got negative 40 minus a minus 21. Well, what do we do right away with minus a minus? Somebody that hasn't answered yet. Gage? Yep, minus a minus goes plus. Change it, change it. Now it looks just like yesterday's. I have a negative 44 plus a positive 21. Signs don't match, so somebody that hasn't answered yet. What do I do when my signs don't match? Yes, ma'am. Subtract. So looking at just the absolute values of these two numbers, 44 is a bigger number than 21. So I'm going to take 44 minus 21, and I get 23. So I know my answer is going to be a 23. Now I have to come back and decide on my sign for 23. Zoe, what's my sign for 23 going to be? Yeah. If you look at the absolute value of 44, whoops, and 21, 44 is definitely a higher number. Since 44 is the higher number, I take the sign that goes with 44, which is a negative. All right, the other part of your homework today is going to be kind of a recall back to our algebra, and you guys should be able to do this. Now, what I want to emphasize, and I saw on the assignment day before last, a lot of people tried to skip a step. Okay, if you skip a step and you just write, and don't write this in your notes because this is not the right answer. I'm just putting something random down. You just put 3 here. Okay, you put 4 here. You put 6 here. That is not complete. That is not done to me. Even if you happen to guess the right answer or have the right answer, I'm not going to count that. I have no idea where those numbers came from, and I can't look into your brain and see why you put that number down. So I just have to assume you just randomly guessed a number. Okay, don't do that. Especially when you've got a variable. If you have a variable like A, you need to write out the problem plugging in what A is. And in this case, A is -11. So I need to rewrite this problem. First off, the first thing you should do is rewrite your problem, replacing the A for what A equals, which in this case is -11 minus 17. Now I'm ready to do the actual work of it. Okay, now I have plugged in what -A equals. Now I'm ready to, I've got -11 and -17. Two negatives go deeper negative. So if my signs match, what do I do with these two numbers? Go ahead, Jaden. I don't know if you've answered. Add. So what's 11 plus 17 is 28. And it's negative, 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 negative. It always goes deeper negative. So my answer is going to be a deeper negative. Okay. Let's see. Let's look at one with A at the back. There we go. So this one right here, B minus C plus A. Okay, B minus C plus A. So my B right here is an 8. So in place of the 8, or in place of the B, I'm going to put an 8. Then my equation has a minus sign, so I'm going to drop that down. Now my C value is a -6. And I want to be careful here because right here is C, right? Here is C is -6. Now my equation had a minus sign. So this minus sign just drops down as part of the equation. But now I've got to put in a value for C, and C equals -6. So I'm going to use my parentheses here and put -6 just so that doesn't get too cluttered. It's Gordon. I do. I sure will. Thanks. Really, after class, go get your lunchbox. All right, so I've got B, which is 8, minus, which is part of my equation, C, which is -6, and then the other part of my equation is a plus sign. And then my A is a -11. And since I don't like two signs touching, I'm going to use a buffer here again and put parentheses. So that when you use parentheses is when you've got two signs right next to each other. You'll notice when I did this one, right? I didn't worry about, you can, it doesn't hurt anything. I didn't worry about putting a parenthesis around the A value because there wasn't a sign out here to mess with it. So the only time I use my parentheses is when it's going to kind of make things look neater with signs. All right. But if you want to use them every time, you certainly can. It doesn't hurt anything. All right. The first thing you always want to look for is there a change it, change it? Do I have any negative negatives? Okay. Let's see. Who haven't I heard from? Aiden, do I have a negative negative? Okay. So where should I change that? Between what two numbers? No, that's a positive and a negative. I'm just looking for a negative negative. Between 8 and 6. See that? Yeah. If I have a negative negative at any point, my first step is going to be to change it, change it. Okay, that's going to clean that up a whole lot and make that a lot easier to work. Now it's just simply 8 plus 6. 8 plus 6 is 14 plus a -11. That should look a lot like yesterday. Positive 14, -11. Do my signs match? Nope. So what am I going to do with those two numbers? Yep, subtract them. Now I got to decide on a sign. Trevor, what sign am I going to give these two? Or this 3? Yeah, It's going to be a positive because between 14 and 11, 14 is the higher absolute value and 14 is a positive number. So my answer stays positive. Okay, yes.
Whenever we change the negatives to positives, like say that inside the parentheses, could we just erase the whole sign and just leave the number?
I wouldn't. I would just put the two little ticks on there and make positive, positive. For one, it'll help me follow your work and see what you did. And for two, when it's like on your worksheet, when it's like this, it won't be erasable because it's already ink that's printed on the paper. So you'll just make it positive, positive. Does that make sense? Okay. Yes. Uh-huh. On which one? This one? Well, the 8 didn't become a negative. So the 8 I just plugged in for B. Did you see that? Follow that part? And then the negative sign right here came down with the equation because it was part of the equation. And then the C value that I had to plug in was -6. So see right here, let me try to, there we go. There's the C value right there. So this value of C was -6. And since I plugged that in after a negative sign, those two negatives went positive. Does that make sense? Because when I wrote it out before I worked it and I wrote it out, it was 8 and then this minus sign right here. And then C, the value of C right here is -6. And then plus, and then the value of A was -11. So that step is just plugging everything in that comes with the equation. Does that make sense? Then I went here and I made it plus plus. And that's where your plus, that's where the 8 plus 6 came in. Does that make sense? It was just in a couple of steps. Let's do one more with negative signs because I think those can be the most confusing. If you think about it like this, go ahead if it helps you, okay? Do this. And that might help you. Now, if you'll notice in the equation, that negative sign and that negative sign, they're going with me no matter what. They're coming down no matter what. Now I just have to plug in what A is, plug in what B is, and plug in what C is. Does that help a little bit, kind of clear up where we're putting numbers? And the parentheses, too many parentheses are never going to hurt you. It's when you don't use parentheses that it can really kind of trip you up. So if you want to use parentheses on all of these and make it a lot clearer, I'm fine with that. So A equals what? -11. So A equals -11. B equals 8. And C equals -6. So what I have done here is I've taken the equation A minus B minus C. And now I have A minus B minus C. Okay, and now I need to work some of the problems, or I need to kind of clean it up a little bit. If the first thing you should always look for is, do you have a minus minus? In this case, I do. I have a minus minus, so I'm going to kind of clean that up. Okay, because trying in your head to minus a minus and figure out which way you go on that can be very confusing. Let's turn it into a very simple plus. Now, the first two is -11 minus 8. Okay, and if it helps you to think about it like we did it yesterday, you can change it, right? You can change it. As long as you change both, you're good. But if I have -11 and -8, do the signs match? -11 minus 8 or -11 and -8, do those signs match? Both negatives? So what's 11 plus 8? 19. And would it be positive or negative? Negative, because negative goes deeper negative. Now I changed these to plus and plus, so I'm just going to write +6 because two negatives always go positive. And now I'm down to my last step, which is -19 plus 6. Do these signs match? So I subtract. 19 minus 6 is 13. And then for my final step, I need to decide my final answer's sign, which would be what this time? Jayla, what do you think? Yeah, negative. Because between the 19 and the 6, thinking absolute value wise, 19 is a bigger number, 19 is negative, so we always take the sign of the bigger. Good. All right, I want to give you your homework now because I want you to have a good 20 minutes in class to work it with me walking around to help you. The top half of your assignment is just like this, where you're just going to be simplifying or evaluating these, okay? The bottom part is going to be the algebra section where you are going to have to plug in values. And if it helps you to use the parentheses, use your parentheses, okay? For those of you at home, go ahead and click load on the bottom of your assignment and work the odds. And if you have any questions, you can shoot me an email.